put on the spotlight for destruction of the environment and directly contributing towards global warming. Farmers and other stakeholders in the agricultural sector have been challenged to re-evaluate and improve their practices to be sustainable and ecologically friendly. In view of this, join Professor Dr. Hamadi Idi Boga, PS Crop Development and Agricultural Research, Ministry of Agriculture, Livestock, Fisheries and Cooperatives; Victor Mugo, Regional Coordinator, Climate Smart Agriculture Youth Network, CSAYN; Victor Gadogo, Advocacy Advisor, Climate and Energy, SNV; Nancy Rapando, Committee Member, Climate Smart Agriculture Multi-Stakeholder Platform, CSA MSP, Kenya. Hosted by Brenda Zeda on KTN News and KTN Farmers TV.
Good morning. So climate smart agriculture may be defined as an approach for transforming and reorientating agricultural development under the new realities of climate change. Climate conscious food production not only provides sustainable livelihoods but also supports biodiversity. Now, implementing adaptation measures at national, county and firm levels, as well as putting in place policies that prevent destruction of the natural environment, will assist to address the challenges posed by climate variability and change. In this forum, experts will dissect different climate-smart agricultural practices and encourage Kenyans to adopt them in the wake of land scarcity, water shortages against a bulging population. You can be part of the conversation by engaging us on our social media platforms, #FarmKenya, at KTN News KE, at FarmKenya254 on Twitter, and also on slido.com, event code #FarmKenya. We are also live on our sister station, KTN Farmers TV. Now let's meet our panelists this morning to help us dissect this important conversation. And I'll begin to give you the bio of Victor Gazongo, who has more than 10 years experience in energy, climate change and environment development sector work. He currently works with SNV, Netherlands Development Organization, in the Voices for Change project that seeks to enhance the resilience of pastoralists to climate change through evidence-based advocacy for inclusive policies and legislative frameworks. So that is who Victor Gizongo is. So let me bring in another expert, the Principal Secretary at the Ministry of Agriculture, that is Professor Dr. Hamadi Idi Boga, and he's the PS Crop Development and Agricultural Research, Ministry of Agriculture, Livestock, Fisheries and Cooperatives. He has a Bachelor of Science in Botany and Zoology and Masters of Science in Botany, Microbiology from Kenyatta University in Kenya. He has also a PhD in microbial ecology and microbiology from University of Constance, that's in Germany, and a postdoctoral research stay at the Max Planck Institute for Terrestrial Microbiology in Marburg, Germany. So that is the profile of Professor Dr. Hamadi Boga. So now we're also privileged to have a lady in this conversation. So I introduce to you, ladies and gentlemen, Rapando Nancy. She is a member of the steering committee of the Climate Smart Agriculture Multi-Stakeholders Platform for Kenya, championed by the Ministry of Agriculture. Nancy is a climate specialist and has worked across East and Central Africa in developing capacities for policy and practices on climate change in agriculture, with a special interest in agriculture supply chains. She has also worked with the private sector and government departments on building capacities towards a climate-resilient agriculture sector. So next, the final gentleman in our discussion this morning is Mr. Victor Mugo, a Regional Coordinator, Climate Smart Agriculture Youth Network. He is the Regional Coordinator for the Climate Smart Agriculture Youth Network, a lead author for UNEP's Global Environmental Outlook for Youth Africa, and he also has a fellowship, and Victor is named the Youth of the Year Agriculture, Agribusiness category, and featured in the list of the top 35 under 35 youth in Kenya. So it is a balanced panel this morning as we have this conversation when it comes to smart agriculture, climate change. So now, let me begin this conversation straight away by beginning, we need to understand what climate smart agriculture is all about. And let me begin with Victor Gazongo. So talk to us about what climate smart agriculture is all about in the wake of climate change.
Thank you, Brenda, and glad to be here today this morning as we discuss climate smart agriculture in Kenya. And thanks for the introduction. Indeed, at SNV Netherlands Development Organization, climate smart agriculture is one of the key thematic sector that we incorporate in our projects. SNV Netherlands Development Organization was started in 1967, and we're in 3 thematic sectors. Agriculture being one of them, and is one of our biggest portfolio when it comes to fighting poverty. We have energy, and we have water and sanitation. So going back to your question on climate smart agriculture, basically defining that to the viewers who are with us today is about looking at transitioning our agriculture system that is climate smart in terms of not being affected by variabilities of weather. We talk about when we are growing our crops, when we are keeping our livestock at homes, how can we continue to produce, produce the harvest that we usually have every year, at the same time looking at the livestock products that we have, considering that indeed these 2 subsectors of agriculture are affected by climate. We're looking at how to enhance that when it comes to resilience to climate change. So basically, also in a layman's language, climate change is actually caused by quite a number of factors, one being anthropological factors, and anthropological factors are factors caused by humans. So when we are back at home, and sometimes we've seen in Kenya whereby we have periods of high, we receive more than usual amount of rainfalls. Sometimes in the north, as you've seen, especially those regions that really practice agropastoralism, they sometimes affected by drought. All these are caused by climate change, and climate change is a big phenomena in the current year, the current age of the 21st century, whereby a lot of conversations are ongoing on how we can promote our agriculture to be smart. Thank you, Brenda. All right,
so let me bring in the climate specialist into this conversation. Nancy, when we talk about climate change, what are signs? Let's talk about the signs that are definite, are actually in depicting climate change in the country and also in relation to agriculture.
Thank you so much, and my name is Nancy, as you've heard, and I represent the multi-stakeholder platform on climate smart agriculture that has been instituted by the Climate Change Unit at the Ministry of Agriculture. And I work with Solidaridad as a person where I support them on climate advisory in terms of how does climate affect commodities, and what do farmers need to do? So that's a good question, because when we are looking at climate, we still look at the weather parameters that include temperature and include precipitation. And as a country, the 2 that are really affecting us is mostly temperature, because the temperatures are rising, and as the temperatures rise, we're looking at seasonalities. Seasons are changing. Farmers who say they expected their rains in February, we are seeing some of these rains starting in April. This year we've had rains throughout, like in Western Kenya, where I'm speaking from in Kakamega County. So all these are unpredicted variables that are happening. We're also seeing that the drought episodes will be more frequent and they'll be harsh. So that means that if we expected a harsh drought in 5 years, but now we expect it like in 2 years' time. So these are the changes that we are attributing to the changing climate, but we also have other changes like around the seas, where we are going to be having the rise in the sea, and those who are having glaciers around them, the melting of glaciers. But at the end of the day, this comes back to affect us, because when the sea levels are rising, then we are losing our coastal spaces. So mainly in Kenya, we are worried because of the rising temperatures and the unstable and the unstable precipitation or rainfall, and then we also looking at the drought episode. So those are the main impacts that we are looking at as a country. Thank you.
All right, and Nancy, actually you've picked up my mind, because I was about to ask Mugo, how does the climate change affect agriculture? But it's good that you've explained it. So let me bring in Mr. Mugo. So why climate smart agriculture? And do you know why should farmers adapt to the climate smart agriculture?
Thank you so much, Nancy, and all the panelists who are here. I am really glad to be here. My name is Victor Mugo, Regional Coordinator for the Climate Smart Agriculture Youth Network. But in addition to that, I am a young farmer as well. And so it's very good to state that, especially in this context. And farming myself, I have come to realize that climate change is really a big part of how agriculture really, whether it's profitable or not. And so climate change is part and parcel of us. And so the way we respond to climate change really will determine whether agriculture is profitable and sustainable. And especially speaking about the youth and getting into agriculture, then those are two very main things that should happen. That agriculture is both profitable and sustainable. And if it's both profitable and sustainable, then we do not have a problem with young people getting into agriculture. So there are very many effects of climate change to agriculture. And I hear the discussion that sometimes people say that the droughts have been here. We've already experienced heat stress, which has already been here. There's already sometimes been change and shift in seasons. But with climate change, what we've seen is that those effects are becoming more severe and becoming more frequent and even becoming more unpredictable. And so I think that's the biggest challenge that we have at the moment with how climate change really is affecting agriculture.
All right, so we all agree so far that farmers need to adapt to the climate smart agriculture. But let me bring in the PS for agriculture, Amadi Boga. And when I see us, how can the message of climate smart agriculture be channeled towards, farmers in the rural areas?
Thank you very much. There's echo in my ears, so I'm hearing myself speak. It's a problem. But the important thing to note is that agriculture impacts on climate, and it's also impacted by climate. So all stakeholders must communicate to the players in the agriculture value chain that our agricultural activities have an impact on climate. 25% of greenhouse gases come from agricultural activities. And at the same time, because of the fact that this has affected the climate, you find that weather has become more erratic and less predictable. It rains when you don't expect it to rain, and there is a drought every 2 years. So we must understand this and be smart. So climate smart agriculture basically means we engage in smart farming that is safe for the climate, and we also engage in smart farming that takes care of all this erratic behavior in the environment. So that means if there is too much rain, we don't complain, we preserve the water, because we know within 3 years there will be a drought, so we should be able to farm with the water that we have preserved to bridge the dry period. How do we get this to farmers? In the ministry, we have a Kenya Climate Smart Agriculture Project. We also have a Climate Smart Unit. And this Kenya Climate Smart Agriculture Project is mainly implemented in 24 counties that are vulnerable to the vagaries of the weather. So we are implementing climate smart solutions, working with the county governments. but also we are monitoring our compliance to the Kyoto Protocol, which is the international protocol where countries have committed to contribute to the reduction of greenhouse emissions. And so any climate smart solutions that we adapt from research institutions like ICRAF and CALRO are applied in these counties which are vulnerable, but in all our projects also, so that we minimize the impact of our own agricultural activities on the climate, which in turn turns around and impacts on us. But this is a long-term engagement with communities so that we change our mindsets about how we farm, and we understand the climate issues, and we help in mitigating. For example, Kenya has the second largest cow population in the world. But yet, in terms of milk production, in terms of beef production, we are still not self-sufficient because of the kind of cows we are having. They contribute to greenhouse emission. We need to be smart about our investment in the livestock sector, so that it's enough to feed us and give us milk, but it's not too big to destroy the environment through emission of methane gas from the cows. So all these things have to be contextualized and packages given to farmers to enable them to farm smart. Less cows, but increased productivity. Thank you.
In fact, I was about to request that you just hold on just a little bit when it comes to that emissions of the greenhouse gases, because we shall be delving deeper into that later on into this conversation on how we can reduce the emissions. But then, CS, talk to us about the innovative ways in which farmers have in the country, so as a way of adapting the practices when it comes to climate smart agriculture.
Yeah, I think the most important thing is for farmers to know, for you to farm, you need water, not rain. So, for example, farmers in dry areas, right now there's a lot of rainfall, but it will cut short in the next 1 week. And there's a lot of water. Yesterday I was watching a meeting on video in Kinango, which is one of the drier parts of Kwale. There was a lot of rain, but all of it is draining into the gullies and ending up in the ocean. What needs to happen is that households need to have household water pans, which can hold water for like 8 months, so that you can bridge the dry season, because usually the dry season is not very long. It usually starts around January to March. Then March you have some more rain, and then maybe June to September. So small bits where we struggle and where you find this vulnerability to climate. So the most important thing is to preserve water. And you don't need government to preserve water. You need common sense. You need to know that the water that is flowing away from my roof is the water that I can preserve in a ditch and use to grow vegetables, to have kitchen gardens, and to even farm commercially. And this is basic. Bishop Masika of Yatta understood this, and he communicated this to the Yatta community. The Yatta community now is exporting French beans, and 10 years ago they were eating donkeys because of drought. Once they understood that they needed to just preserve the water, 90% of the problem was solved. And I think we have, all of us, to preach preserve water, preserve water, preserve water, because agriculture depends on it, life depends on it.
All right.
Yeah.
And just as I bring in Mr. Kathogo into this conversation, let me just read for you what UNEP had to say about this climate smart agriculture. And this is what UNEP says, Mr. Kathogo, that climate change has affected food system because this severity of floods and droughts over the years has put the agricultural sector of Kenya and many developing countries are at the risk of growing food insecurity. So what I'd like you to talk to us about is what we can do as a country, in conjunction with the county and the national government, and also the private sector, in ensuring that the country is food secure when farmers are trying to adopt to the climate smart agriculture.
Yeah, thanks, Brenda. And picking up, I think, from the P.S. Amadi Boga points is that indeed we need to transition our agricultural sector from a rain-fed, relying on rainfall to plant to other methods that indeed have shown that are working, and of course are transitioning farmers away from being dependent on rainfall to plant their crops. So going back to your question, indeed there are quite a number of interventions that are happening both at county level, at national level, of course with the private sector players and international partners coming on board. Just picking up on some few examples. Indeed, when it comes to severity of flooding, severity of rainfall in some of this region, we've seen cases whereby farmers increasingly have been asked to, to invest in technologies that work for them, but those technologies that are cost-effective to a farmer. One example is picking up from what the PS has mentioned is the use of ponds, where we are seeing quite a number of farmers now are investing, coming together through Farmers Association to come up with water ponds. Of course, this also is benefiting a lot of the pastoralist communities in the north who are originally livestock farmers. So what they do is that, they just come up with the association, build a pond, and they line it with polythene. Then they are able to harvest that water. And after that, then they're able to use that water to, to water their crops or to, to have their livestock, taking that water. Indeed, private sector has played a big role when it comes to water use efficiency. And water use efficiency is very important for agricultural sector, whereby we've seen quite a number of companies in Kenya coming up with smart irrigation kits. So these kits allow farmers to use their water efficiently, but also they are able to get more products or in terms of yields from what they grow. The other thing that I want to mention is that, of course, in light of devolution in Kenya, we've seen counties are really playing a big role when it comes to an enabling environment for private sector to to come and assist the farmers, but also investments coming from national government. So we've worked together with quite a number of counties, especially just to give examples, in Isiolo County, in Marsabit County, where these counties are really affected by unreliable rainfall. So what we've done is that we've come up with policies that target implementation of climate-smart agriculture interventions. And one way that we've done so is to ensure that counties like Isiolo come up with livestock sale yard acts. So what happens is that whenever the farmer is able, produces his livestock, is able to sell that product, to Mwananchi. And for us who enjoy our beef, nyama choma in Nairobi, we're able to get very healthy animals because simply what the farmer has done is that he's able to feed the animals, but at the same time, they are not affected by drought. Another way that maybe, Brenda, as I finish, is ensuring that indeed we come up with climate change policies. And these policies come up with interventions that identify how farmers can adopt climate-smart agriculture.
All right, and also, I was about also the same thing I told the PS, just hold on. Yes. Just hold your thoughts when it comes to that, matters policy, because she'll be delving again into matters policy here in the country when it comes to the climate-smart agriculture. But I like what you talked about, what you've mentioned about interventions that have been put in place. So let me bring in Nancy. When you're talking about interventions, the farmers who have, felt the effects of the climate change and they're wondering about the sort of subsidy the government can give them in terms of providing seed that are resilient to climate change.
Okay, thank you, Brenda. Maybe I have not gotten your question very well, but I think I'm listening to the discussion around resilient seed. And I think what is important about that word resilient is because we are not talking about drought-resistant seed alone, but we are also talking about seed that is tolerant to the increasing rainfall. Because I think what has mainly been done is people are able to access drought-tolerant seed, but I think we are having a challenge with the increasing precipitation, understanding which varieties are most suitable for this scenario. So I just want to talk about one of the work I do at Solidaridad is to actually look at what farmers are doing in terms of changing their varieties, and are they testing the type of varieties they have? I've realized that farmers are even becoming scientists. They're working ahead of us because they're able to look at the way the different varieties are performing on their farms. Because recently I visited farmers in Mount Elgon and in Nandi Hills. These are coffee farmers, and I was actually asking them that how many varieties do you have and how are they performing? And they were able to tell me the different varieties that are working well with the drought and the different varieties that are working well with the increasing rainfall. And what farmers are thinking ahead of us is diversification. They want to diversify their farms in a way that, because they don't believe they have accurate climate information in terms of how it's gonna rain the whole year, what they are doing is that they are keeping farms with drought-tolerant varieties and also keeping farms with rainfall tolerant varieties that can withstand the increasing rainfall. So what this means is that we also have a challenge to ensure that we are equipping farmers with the right varieties and the right information on which varieties are going to be working at when different climatic episodes are going to affect them.
But then, Nancy,
we expect that you are growing coffee, yes.
But then, Nancy, it's good you're talking about providing farmers with a variety of seeds that are, drought resilient. But the farmers are also looking at the cost of these seeds and probably the fertilizers.
Yeah, the issue, you talked about the issues of subsidies, and I would actually say that maybe PS Boga would be the best person to explain about the fertilizer subsidy programs and how that is working. But also from a climate change perspective, we know that fertilizers have something to do with climate mitigation on increasing the amount of greenhouse gases. So how do we talk about precision fertilizer so that farmers are not over-fertilizing, because the fertilizers are all flowing to the rivers and affecting biodiversity, which is an environmental impact that agriculture has on the ecosystems. Right. So I will leave the discussion on fertilizer subsidies for PS Boga.
No problem,
but also
Nancy.
to talk about the insurance in terms of the crop and livestock insurance. I think he is best to talk about it, about the type of incentives the government is giving out to ensure that farmers adapt better to the changing climate.
In fact, I was about to ask CS, Boga, about that, how the government can actually lure farmers into farming during this time of trying to adapt to the climate-smart agriculture. Bwana PS, kindly talk to us about it.
Yeah, I think there are a number of incentives that the government has put in place. Number one, we have an insurance scheme, both for crops and livestock. And basically this is to shield farmers in case of loss as a result of climate issues. This cannot cover all farmers, but it's designed to showcase to farmers that you can insure your farm, you can insure your livestock, so that you can protect it from the vagaries of climate as well as other issues that affect farming. The other thing that is very key is that we moved away from procurement of bulk fertilizer. At that time it was mainly DAP, which has a problem of acidification of the soils. And acidification is also a process which undermines the productivity because the mineral elements that the plant will need cannot be released. So it affects what is known as cation exchange. So now what we do, we tell the farmers to test the soils so that they know exactly what their soil needs, and then they can buy that particular blend of fertilizer that is specific to their soils. Right now the yields are very low. Despite using a lot of fertilizer, we have the highest fertilizer use rate in East Africa, maybe in Africa, and yet the yields are very low at 2 metric tons per hectare for maize and even for the other crops. And so farming smart means soil testing and then using the right blend to increase productivity without impacting on the soil.
All right.
One of the other things that farmers have to do, and we feel this is key, is to do away with the disc plow, because the disc plow is the one that is loosening the soil, contributing to loss of soil water and soil acidity, and shifting to conservation agriculture. Once they shift to conservation agriculture, and FAO has had various programs to introduce farmers to conservation agriculture, there will be more soil organic matter, we will hold more carbon in the soil, and then that will lead to less acidity and improve on cation exchange and improve on availability of nutrients to the plants. And that way we will be farming smart.
Right.
There are a number of farmers who have adopted that, and their productivity are high and their soils are stable. And so we need to protect the soil as part of climate smart agriculture. Right. And those are part of the packages that we are giving to farmers, and will intensify the conversations around soil, productivity, and climate.
All right, and you know, I like the fact that we have Mugo, who's you're an organization that deals a lot with matters of smart agriculture, you know, climate smart agriculture, but you're also a farmer yourself. And just from what the PS has said, kindly tell us whether the government has done enough as a way of, you know, luring young people into farming in terms of subsidy, pricing of fertilizers, the prices of seeds that are resilient to climate change.
Thank you so much for that question. And one thing that we've discovered, and one thing that we have come to learn from extensive research, is that young people are getting into farming. The only challenge is their quality of farming and what they are getting out of their farming. But it's not in doubt that young people are transitioning into agriculture. And the government really is working hard at this moment. I could say that because I have seen numerous initiatives that have been brought about by government, so that to especially encourage young people to get into farming, but not just farming, into climate smart agriculture, in such a way that it's profitable and sustainable for them to get into the sector. And we think that through climate smart agriculture, then there's an opportunity for young people to get decent employment opportunities. We have an opportunity for young people to contribute towards food security, but as well, young people can become the champions of climate action. And one thing that I've also noticed is, for example, with drought-resistant seeds. And we've seen CalRO release some of these seeds. I can talk of one that I am growing myself, the high iron bean from CalRO. And what I have discovered with that is, although the seed is a little expensive, but the production is really high. And so that caters for the cost of production. And even in addition to that, the new seed varieties are more marketable in the market. And then that also helps me as a young farmer to make more out of my agriculture. So I really believe that climate smart agriculture has a way to transform the way agriculture is done, and such that even young people can get decent employment opportunities and even increase their livelihoods.
All right, and just remind our viewers on KTN News and also on Farmers TV, our sister station, you can also engage us in this conversation when using a Slido event code is Farm Kenya Breakfast. You're talking about climate smart agriculture in the wake of the changing climate change that we're actually witnessing here in our country. But then let me bring in CS Boga into this conversation, and I like what what Mr. Mugo has said in terms of ensuring that even the young people who get into agriculture are well catered for. But then my question is, so why can't the government pick up part of the cost to lure farmers?
Yeah, I think the most important thing to note that the government was picking up the cost through the fertilizer subsidy program, which was abused and which we changed into the e-voucher. So right now the government is supporting about 200,000 farmers using the e-voucher program. And that means the farmer picks 60% and we pick 40%. The other thing is that the government also has zero-rated most of these inputs. They are not being taxed. So that is another way also. And so that is a lot of cost removed from farmers. I think the challenge is not the cost, it's the efficiency. Even if we cut your cost and you're doing 5 bags per acre when you should be doing 40, that means the biggest thing is capacity building. So I think we should invest more in extension so that the farmers increase in their productivity, so that they are able to meet the costs of production. That means your productivity, your output should be able to shield you from any costs that come. Otherwise, subsidy alone with inefficiency is like subsidizing inefficiency, and it's not good for the farmer, it's not good for the environment, and it's not good for the economy.
And Kathogo, let me just, according to FAO, when I was looking at the website when it comes to matters of smart agriculture, they're saying that about around 570 million farmers across the world are facing the threat of climate change at present. So stepping up and facing the many challenges in agriculture, it means it's not easy when you look at that figure. So can we say that the solution may lie in a climate smart agriculture system?
Yes, thanks, Brenda. Indeed, and I think that is what we are really pushing the agenda today, that indeed it's no longer business as usual for farmers in Kenya. We've seen cases whereby a lot of farmers are affected by, dwindling yields from the produce that they grow. So what basically it means is that it's no longer business as usual. We need to transition, the agricultural practices that we've been practicing for quite a time, if I may call them kind of old practices. So we've seen cases whereby now farmers increasingly are being, their capacities are being enhanced, but they're also being made aware that there exist technologies and solutions that can, transition them to a climate-smart agriculture. Mm-hmm. So basically giving examples, for example, because I like using examples, and it's good for farmers also outside there who are viewing us to understand what we are talking about. Mm-hmm. Basically, look at, the North Rift farmers who grow a lot of, maize. And we've seen cases whereby these areas are receiving rainfall more than what they have been used in the past. And when you see such farmers, once their maize matures and they leave it to in their farms for it to dry, and you get incidences whereby there's more rainfall, then this maize will be affected by aflatoxin. Right. And when you have such a product being sold in the markets, we come and talk about food safety issues. And for example, just for the last 5 years, at SNV, we've been championing a lot on issues of food safety, going back also to the dairy, sector, which most of our farmers do practice in the central part of region, in North Rift, in the west side, whereby we are talking about what, looking at the value chain and telling them that indeed, as we are looking at your value chain, how are you mitigating, against climate change? Uh-huh. And of course, we also talk about adaptive coping mechanisms, whereby we encourage, we've been partnering with counties like, for example, Nakuru County, Nyandarua County, to come up with plans so that these plans can safeguard, can inform planning at county level, but also can help our farmers when it comes to food safety issues. And
just listening to you, it looks like you have broadly talked about the parameters that actually, when you talk about, climate smart agriculture, that fall within that. And the 3 parameters are just sustainability, increasing agricultural productivity and farmers' incomes. Then we also have adapting to climate change, and then finally also reducing greenhouse gas emissions wherever possible. We shall be delving into that immediately. But then, Nancy, talking about these parameters that Mr. Kathogo has actually talked about indirectly, talk to us about some of the practices that farmers can use to fight climate change in the country.
Okay, thanks so much, Brenda. I think for me that is the most important thing. We need to demystify what is CSA. Because I remember when we were starting the multi-stakeholder platform to bring together actors working on CSA, we had a lot of actors distancing themselves, saying what we are doing is called conservation agriculture, what we are doing is called agroecology, what we are doing is called something else. And this is the reason why the BioVision Foundation and CCAFs felt that there is a gap in the country in terms of people understanding what is CSA. Bottom line is that if you are practicing an agriculture that increases food security and incomes and is helping farmers to adapt to the climate risks and also has some level of mitigation co-benefits, because we don't push farmers to look at reducing greenhouse gases. What we do is that we would like farmers to adopt practices that are increasing production and productivity and helping them to respond to climate risks. And just to say that it's a big number of practices inside here. But what is key is that farmers need climate information. What risks are ahead of them? That's why the meteorology department is very critical. We need farmers to know when it will rain. We need farmers to know when the dry spell is coming, and we need them to know this in time. So that is still an area that as a country we are improving and still improving, so that we as the recipients of this information are able to receive it and be able to trust it, so that we are able to respond to it. Another aspect is what we call climate finance. So when we are talking about all these packages of insurance and resources that need to go into funding technologies, we need this finance to support CSA.
All right.
But as a country, when you look at the NDC that Kenya is going to communicate to the UNFCCC, we are talking about sustainable land management practices as part of our CSA package that we need to focus on. So that means that practices like agroforestry, reducing tillage, in terms of maybe planting enough pastures, all these fall into the CSA package.
In fact,
all
Nancy,
the practices around managing waste within our factories, we all call this CSA. So it's a big number of practices inside here. And so we should not look at CSA as a practice, but it is a big approach that is embracing a number of practices and a number of things that are being done by all actors in Kenya.
In fact, Nancy is about to ask you, it's good you brought up that, because I was about to ask you, because when you're talking about climate change, you're talking about CSA, that is climate smart agriculture. You're not talking about, farmers who deal with crops. You're also talking about livestock farmers. And we're not talking about practices that the livestock farmers can do in terms of fighting climate change. How then can these livestock farmers be included into intercrop, multiple cropping and crop rotational, yet they're farmers who deal with livestock, in terms of, just broadening that sector of farming?
Okay, thank you, Brenda. For us, from a climate smart perspective, livestock is a very critical enterprise, because one, our greenhouse gases are high because of the livestock sector. So we're looking at our targets to reduce greenhouse gases in the agriculture sector, mainly using a livestock lens. So what does this mean is that we need sustainable practices in the livestock sector, but also looking at our main producing areas for beef. These are areas that are mainly affected by climate change, and these farmers are suffering because they don't have pastures. So we need programs that ensure increased access to pastures. I believe that our first insurance on agriculture in Kenya targeted livestock farmers. How do you ensure that livestock farmers, when they make a loss during drought, that this livestock is insured, that these farmers do not face a big loss and they're able to drop out of the livestock business? Because as Kenya, we really depend on livestock, because someone talked about nyama choma. Coming to the dairy sector is where we are talking about efficiency, because that's why you are seeing the biogas systems coming out. How do we convert all these greenhouse gases from the stomach of a cow into manure rather than being released as greenhouse gases and increasing our carbon footprint as a country. So a number of practices exist, and I'm sure when you look at what CCAFS has done, look at the climate smart agriculture framework for Kenya that we have produced. It really talks about practices in crop and the livestock sector and the fishery sector. So let's not leave out all these sectors when we're talking about CSA.
That's true, Nancy. And it looks like all of us cannot just hold just to talk about the reducing emissions. So here we go. Let's talk about reducing emissions. And I like what a report by FAO says. It says that to achieve food security and agricultural development goals by 2030, adapting to climate change and lowering emissions will be necessary. So let's talk about some practices that can reduce emissions from agriculture. Let me bring in PS Boga before I bring in Mr. Mugo also to respond to that.
I think the most important thing is to look at the sources of emission and try to minimize those sources. I think for us the biggest source, of course, is livestock. We have large livestock herds, and they produce methane gas that contributes to this problem of climate change. So I think the most important thing is to move into practices where we own less herds. That means a lower number of cows, but increasing production, be it meat or be it beef, or be it beef or be it milk. And this requires a change of mindset. In the past, we counted the number of herds as wealth culturally, as well as we used it for cultural practices. And I think those communities have sort of to shift. There was a lot of course, grazing, including overgrazing, that is exposing the soil, leading to soil erosion, leading to loosening of soil carbon and things like that. And of course the other way is to, whenever we have this mixed kind of farming, we use the cow manure as part of organic farming, adding to soil conditioning and adding to soil carbon. That of course minimizes the use of synthetic fertilizers. Some of the nitrogen-based fertilizers also release nitrous oxide into the atmosphere, and sometimes even methane. Not methane, but ammonia gas, which are also contributing to ozone depletion. So you find in some of the societies, some of the communities, some of the households, they're able to go the full circle using manure and avoiding synthetic fertilizers. And I think this is also a key area. And then, of course, widespread adoption of conservation agriculture and then agroforestry practices that make sure that the ecosystem services are maintained, because our farming and the use of, for example, synthetic pesticides has led to loss of biodiversity, all of it impacting on climate and on nature in general, and on our life support system for the whole world.
All right. And Mr. Muga, I like what the PS has brought in about, agroforestry. So let's talk about the idea of planting trees as a way to tackle the emissions, to absorb the green gas emissions.
Thank you so much, Brenda, for that question. And I believe agroforestry is one of the practices that we should take even as a country. I know as a country we have committed to maintaining a 10% tree cover. And the agroforestry practices really help us to get into that space. So I think PS has mentioned some of the measures in which that can be taken. I just wanted to take one example I think that is almost forgotten every single time, and this is about food loss and food waste. For example, we lose a third of all the food that we produce, and that is that shows that we cannot be able to achieve food security if we are already losing a third of all that we produce. So the food that we produce and that goes to waste shows that we have lost the energy that went into producing that, the water that went into producing that, and once this food is just left out there, then it produces methane, which is also a greenhouse gas. And so we really need also to think about post-harvest losses and how we can be able to reduce that, especially, for example, in the mango value chain that comes sometimes during a season, and after that season, then we are not able to preserve all those mangoes, and so most of them go to waste. Even in something such as of avocado that comes sometimes seasonally, sometimes even maize. So we really need to look at the way we produce, but not also just produce, but also how we consume our food, because that contributes to food loss, which also contributes agriculture to climate change.
All right. So then, are we saying that livestock and agriculture farmers, and when I talk about the agriculture farmers, includes, farmers who plant maize, beans, and the livestock farmers also need to play a role in terms of planting trees as a way of absorbing the green gas emission?
Absolutely, absolutely. And agroforestry, as I said, is one of the practices that is considered very climate smart, because especially the trees reduce soil erosion. They help the soil texture to become more compact, and then that allows for soil carbon sequestration. So that also, that the trees are able to absorb more carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. Then we can also see those trees, due to evapotranspiration, then they can be able to cause rain. So really, agroforestry is a way to go, and I would encourage, I think from time ago, that all farms, a tenth of the farm would go into planting trees. I really would encourage that we could be able to do this. And not just because of those benefits, but these trees also have commercial value. And so if a farmer will not just do this because of the benefits that come to them due to rain, due to better soil health, due to better soil texture, then they can do this because of the commercial value that comes along with trees.
All right, so Mr. Gadhogo, then how can both the national and the county governments, including also private partners, organizations, agricultural authorities in the country, what can they do, or how can they work together in terms of ensuring that the green gas emission is actually a thing of the past in the country when you're talking about the climate smart agriculture?
Thanks, Brenda. Indeed, and that's why we have Nancy today on this, this discussion is, I also belong to the MSP on CSA, and of course, this multi-stakeholder platform, actually the purpose is to bring everybody on board so that we are able to chart a common, front when it comes to climate smart agriculture, including just picking up on the point where Mugo is mentioning that indeed farmers need to ensure that a tenth of their farms have tree crop cover, which is very important. And as we all know, back in the days when, for those who went through the 844 system, and we had the 4K clubs whereby we were really passing the information to, to the young kids that indeed, when you cut one tree, you need then to plant two. Simply because trees play an important role when it comes to, fighting climate change. But of course, going back to the question on how we need to convene together is because I believe everybody has a very unique, we all have unique solutions to the problem that is affecting us today on climate change. So private sector with the innovation, they come up with innovative products that are able to be taken up by, the farmers. At the same time, the academia and, state agencies are able to come up with the knowledge on how to fight climate change. I want to appreciate what Calro is doing when it comes to,
doing that. They call it. How can we reduce the green gas emission?
Okay, kitchen garden is actually very important when it comes to food security, but also issues of health. At SNV, we've carried quite a number of research products whereby we're encouraging more people to have kitchen gardens, because then, you, in terms of your health, you'd rather get that vegetable that you've grown at the back of your house, knowing how, you're the one who grew it. And one way we encourage households to ensure is to have kitchen gardens that also use organic compost. Mm-hmm. And organic compost is very important, such that you are playing an individual role when it comes to ensuring that you have good food in your house, but at the same time, when it comes to what the PS mentioned about, you don't use synthetic fertilizers that are playing a critical role when it comes to the climate change, but also our environment in terms of when these fertilizers leach into the ground, maybe they cause acidification. Mm-hmm. At the end of the day, that water might also affect a farmer's who's downstream. And if he's practicing fish farming, that is a big issue for these farmers, because we all want to eat good food, safe food, but at the same time contribute to interventions towards fighting climate change.
All right, safe food. We all need safe food. We all need safe food. So, ladies and gentlemen, just stay with me. I need us to take a short commercial break. But when we come back, we shall be delving into which is the better way to take or to go. Is it the climate smart agriculture or organic farming? I'm sure you really don't want to miss all that. After a short commercial break, I'm taking here on KTN News and also Farmers TV.
With ongoing concerns over climate change, the role of various agricultural practices has been put on the spotlight for destruction of the environment and directly contributing towards global warming. Farmers and other stakeholders in the agricultural sector have been challenged to reevaluate and improve their practices.
Generation, those who sow the seed will not enjoy the shade. One generation sows the seed, another one waters it.
Or on Twitter.